Um, hey everyone, a favorite guest of the Left Hook, tech reporter David Morris is back. You know him, you love him. And David is the managing editor at Zero Knowledge Group and the author of the fantastic book that you all should buy, Stealing the Future, where he talks about all these, on my term, psychopaths, these techno fascists, these weirdos. If you don't believe me, check out Elon Musk's latest tweets. It's something. But I have David on because
Mhm.
I think it's a big story. We got a lot. We got the failed Iran war, all the corruption of Donald Trump, the racism, primary races, Israel's ongoing genocide, the economy, gas prices, yada yada yada. But the, if you will, the wizard, the perverse wizards who are behind the scenes, who are orchestrating much of this chaos, are the techno fascist billionaires who are also in bed with Epstein. And it's them and their infatuation with living forever, having more power, having more money, that's propping up all these data centers. And lo and behold, David, I think we predicted this year ago. These data centers are now unpopular because once they open up in people's backyards, they're like, holy shit, this sucks. They're taking my money. They're taking my land. They're taking my resources. They're taking my water. They're polluting everything and they're creating no jobs. So now that it's an 80-20 issue and about 80% of Americans hate these data centers because they've seen what damage they've done to their community once they pop up, um, you have this desperate doubling down. And we saw something fascinating, and I want your take on this. Mark Zuckerberg, this psychopath who's the head of Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, released his AI agenda. Can you please tell us the wisdom behind Mark Zuckerberg's words? Of course, he's brilliant. He's genius. He has so much money, which means God has favored him. Tell me, tell me how my overlord, Mark Zuckerberg, will rule me benevolently in his agenda, David.
Yeah, thanks, Watch. Thanks for having me on. Great as usual. So, I think that what's fascinating to me about this document is that it forces you to reckon with the idea that there are many different kinds of, as you say, psychopaths in the spectrum here, and it is it's a spectrum, and it's maybe the spectrum. The interesting thing about the Zuckerberg essay bizarrely, is that it is far more sane, reasonable, and even, at least superficially, sort of democratic than the ideas that we get from OpenAI and Anthropic and this sort of more what I connect to effective altruism as a
Yes.
movement, which goes back to Sam Bankman-Fried. So to look just really specific, but to make it clear, and this is actually quite hilarious because you talk about community opposition to data centers. One of the examples that he cites in this essay where he, is aspiring to be a little bit more friendly and a little bit less menacing than OpenAI and Anthropic, he refers to a data center project in Richland Parish, Louisiana, which has been, in fact, not so much of a happy go lucky story as a real fight over the environment with the community. So, even within this much more massaged, I think, very carefully considered position paper, which does specifically position Facebook against OpenAI and Anthropic, because I think people are figuring out that these companies' messaging is really scary. Whatever the substance, their messaging is really scary to the public. Zuck is trying to shift that messaging while, frankly, still having a fairly scary practical substance to what he's doing.
Okay, so in his manifesto or his agenda, it's how many words was it? Like 8,000 words? It was pretty big, right?
It's 6,500 words, and I think
That
this
was
is
close.
another really important detail, which is that it's a long essay. Zuckerberg has not written an essay like this since 2017 when he wrote one about global community, which was basically meant to distract and defray from the controversy around things like Citizens United that was happening. I'm sorry, not Citizens United. Um, Data leaks having to do with the election and Trump that were happening around 2016. So he's written a big essay, and that's significant because who else loves writing big essays? Well, Sam Altman and Dario Amodei of OpenAI and Anthropic. And if you go back, I don't want to get too deep into this, but if you look back at the last 10 years or so of what Facebook's business has been, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't have a wealth of new ideas and has done a lot of imitation and acquisition. And I think this is another, just the essay format itself is another interesting example of him imitating the people who he is kind of following rather than being a leader, even though he's the largest, or one of the largest tech companies.
I think it's a very important point because we have to demystify these individuals. And I use the wizard very deliberately. If for those who don't know, who haven't read the book or seen the movie or the musicals, the wizard is not this grand, brilliant, powerful, mythical creature. He's just a con man. He's a con man that uses a lot of technology. He's like a movie director, right? Makeup and props and smoke and shadows that makes him appear as this
Hmm.
all powerful wizard. And then you literally, peer behind the curtain. And you're like, oh, you're like this old dude who's just engaged in a lot of gimmickry. And you use that for, let's be honest, control and power and wealth. Oh, huh. You're not.
And we'll get into it, but a lot of that behind the curtain stuff is sort of financial engineering, basically. And we saw that recently with Leo Aschenbrenner and Situational Awareness, a hedge fund that blew up, and we'll get to it. But yes, it's very much a person behind the curtain situation in all of these cases. I think what is most interesting here is that Zuckerberg has his obviously immense wealth and giant organization, and it's not that they're necessarily entirely opposed. Obviously, they're part of the same industry, but the OpenAI and Anthropic faction, they have wealth too, for sure. But they also have this network, this incredibly tight knit sort of pseudo academic network of people who move between organizations and nonprofits. And it seems like, again, with the substance of this essay, part of what Zuckerberg is doing is separating himself from the messaging of that wing of Silicon Valley a little bit, but also literally just sort of making a political move, even though he's in very deep with Peter Thiel, who is also kind of one of the inputs to this effective altruism axis that controls artificial intelligence, even though they're kind of frenemies, this is a bit of a split between those factions.
Yeah.
And to get into like a specific couple of points that he summarizes, the emphasis here is he's trying to talk about personal empowerment,
Yes.
invention, and balance of power, and those all get to sort of specific concerns that the opposing faction of AI controllers have basically used to leverage power. I think is
Yeah,
one way.
yeah. Well, it's two things. One thing with I'm glad you mentioned a couple minutes ago. You said these guys don't create much. Mark Zuckerberg took over WhatsApp. Mark
Hmm.
Zuckerberg took over Instagram.
Hmm.
Right. Uh,
Exactly.
Elon Musk, he didn't create Tesla. He's got $38 billion of subsidy from the United States government. Right. Like NASA did a lot of the work, and he's like, let me come in and f everything up. And they're like, sure, why not? F NASA. Let's bring in SpaceX. Right. So I need us to puncture the myth of some brilliant Ubermensch gifted by
Yep.
God. These guys are weird freaks and dweebs and increasingly sociopathic with all the money and the power they have. With that aspect of personal super intelligence, right? Can you talk
Mhm.
to us about that's the new buzzword that's in his latest manifesto?
Yeah.
It's personal super intelligence. AI is
Yeah.
going to be awesome. It'll make you personal super intelligence. You're like, yeah. Talk to us about how what bullshit they're selling.
First of all, yeah, let's just address that like super intelligence is not really a meaningful term. I mean, I think that and I want to say I will say a few things that might be rather contrarian to members of your audience, but I have, I think that the philosophical underpinnings of the AI people are really flawed, but I think it's very clear that AI we call it AI, it's not really AI, but these are tools that are useful whether you're, you're a researcher trying to compile information, like there are applications for them. But
No, I think that's
what
fair. I think most people
yeah,
would agree. I've
but
never used
super intelligence is a different thing than what
I've
we've
never
got
used
right now.
AI to write anything because I wanna write like, if I
Right.
say buy Wajahat, I think that's just me.
Yeah.
But when it comes
Same.
to research, it could be very helpful in collating a lots of data from different sources, and then if I'm really researching and I wanna make sure I get everything right, then I can then use that to click on the
Mhm.
links. So it makes things like it organizes it, brings it together, and then I can use it as a resource, saves me a lot of time. So
Yeah.
it can be very useful as a tool.
Yeah.
but I
Well,
don't
this
want to bend
idea
my
of
knee
super
to it.
intelligence it is evoking, yes, bend your knee. It is evoking this idea, and this is where the Zuckerberg essay is kind of going in two directions at once, right? Because the very idea of super intelligence implies some kind of submission to the AI overlord.
Yes.
But he is, and I think this is where I give him some credit. I don't necessarily love the terminology, but the concept behind personal super intelligence or just personal AI or a personal LLM that could be read in a fairly positive way, again, compared to the vision that you get from OpenAI or Anthropic. OpenAI or Anthropic, when they're talking about the politics or the implementation of all of these things, the implicit vision is that there is one AI that lives in a box and everybody goes to that box and asks it questions. It gives the same answer to everybody so that it is the universal source of truth. That is the even more authoritarian implicit vision going forward. Zuckerberg in this essay opposes that basically by saying that you should have an agent that pursues your interests. And that sounds like selfish or whatever, but he has a quite decent rationale for it. You should have a personal agent that executes things that you want done. And that's not just how it's going to help you, but according to this vision, that's where the balance of power comes from that he's talking about. That if everybody has access to these tools, and one of the suspicious parts of this essay is his description of the mechanisms for giving everybody access. But at this earlier point in the argument, he's saying if everybody has access, then we're going to have less risk of, for example, the cyber attacks that we've been seeing coming in a really problematic way because everybody is going to be able to use these tools to make things safer. This is very much in opposition to, like, especially Dario Amodei, who has been quite
Of Anthropic,
overt
folks.
of Anthropic, who has been quite overt about asking and or inviting government to come in and tell him you can't release this model. It's too powerful. Only a few people get access to it. And again, to plug the book, this is one of the implicit things built into effective altruism. Stealing the future is about effective altruism. And they basically believe, I mean, underpinning all of this is eugenics, a belief in racial superiority of some people over others. But before they get to that point, they at least believe that they are smarter than other people individually, and therefore that they should have control over how all of these things are implemented. So that I think is the thing to pay attention to here. And again, not an endorsement of Mark Zuckerberg, but he's at least here and in other places saying the right things, which is you shouldn't have to go to Anthropic to ask permission for what you can ask their AI agent or what you can be allowed to think about using these agents or what you can be allowed to research. And so that, again, to give him very limited credit, he's at least making some decent sounds on
Yeah,
those
very
issues.
limited credit. And speaking about Anthropic, I wanted to ask you about this because I flagged this was from 2.5 days ago, Wall Street Journal. Anthropic is meeting with potential investors to shore up
Mhm.
confidence in what could be
Yep.
the largest IPO of all time, offering assurances about its rapid pace of growth and strategies it expects will help address a growing backlash
Right.
against AI. David.
Yeah, when you see the framing like that, it's really right there, even in sort of mainstream business press. It's hard to ignore. To set like a little context for this, we did see OpenAI initially saying that they were going to try an IPO this year in 2026, and that has now been pushed. And now we have Anthropic, their main competitor, starting to float the idea of a an I want to say OPI, a public offering, an IPO. And I think that we are right now the timing is interesting because the reason OpenAI delayed their IPO is that right now, I think we are in kind of, to some extent, the trough of disillusionment with any technological innovation where they've started to see some of the practical problems, including the challenges of getting data centers into communities that don't want them, building power in a way, building literal power generation so that these data centers aren't directly hiking people's electric bills, which is going to make it an even harder sell. But I mean, even more at the same time, like the community stuff is significant, but really, we're also seeing questions, pretty serious questions that I think still have not been fully addressed from people like Ed Zitron asking whether the business models themselves actually make sense, whether the cost of all of this compute and compute build out is A, going to actually return revenues to the companies themselves, or B, produce social good in a sort of macro way, in a way that would justify it. We're obviously undeniably in a kind of tech infrastructure bubble where they're
Yep.
building all of these data centers. We are also very much in a financial bubble of the
Yep.
data centers because we saw Nvidia a couple of days ago announcing this new $500 billion facility where they were going to backstop essentially new debt to their own customers. And this circular financing and spinning up off balance sheet entities to load up with debt as they build the data centers is starting to look a little bit Enron-y, a little bit worrying from that perspective. So the IPO then becomes an off ramp for some people, and certainly a test of how credible this stuff is if it really hits the market. And it becomes a moment of high anxiety, right? Because if you look back to, I believe, 2019 or 2020, you had, I think this is something where you have a potential of a WeWork situation where when you file for an IPO, you have to file this document called an S1 that includes your actual sort of legally binding statements of your business practices, your inputs and outputs, your incomes and expenses. And the real question becomes when you get an S1 on the table, what is it going to look like? And are people going to look at it like they did WeWorks and laugh at it and immediately shut the whole thing down? Because that is definitely on the possibility in the spectrum of the universe.
You know, um, I appreciate that, and leads up to an exquisite example that I know you've been dying to talk about it, but let me set it up with my commentary, and then I want your response to this. I'm old enough to remember the 2000 dot-com bubble. I'm from the Bay Area. I'm old enough to remember 2008, the economic crisis, housing crisis that affected California, Florida, Nevada in particular. I'm old enough to know that these same people failed up because they were bailed out. I have been saying for the past 2 years, I see patterns. I'm a simple English major, but I just see patterns. And I'm like, these people are over promising, they're under delivering.
Hmm.
So much money is being spent that they're deliberately, in a way, trying to get enough sunk cost in this technology that
Yep.
essentially governments and corporations become tethered to it. Whether or not it'll deliver or not, it's like it's too big to fail. You're all in. We can't back out now, right? You
Yep.
see Oracle literally firing 30,000 people to save money for AI. You're seeing them, like you said, leverage so much debt, and it's all inshallah. It's worth it, inshallah. This is the future, inshallah. This will create jobs, inshallah. Just shut up and give us money. Let us create
Hmm.
data centers. We're smart. You're idiots, inshallah. Right? This will solve all the problems, inshallah, inshallah, inshallah. And everyone has boners for new ideas, and it's a big circle jerk because they're all Silicon Valley and they get Fortune magazines and Forbes magazines, right? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this looks like a big Ponzi scheme. I could
Hmm.
be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Because if this bubble pops, oh boy, this will be like 2008, but dumber. Now we'll see. We haven't reached it yet. But there's some troubling signs. And I know you've been
Hmm.
chomping at the bit to talk about this.
Yeah.
Leopold Aschenbrenner built a $45 billion, that's a B, guys,
Hmm.
billion-dollar AI hedge fund called Situational Awareness. It collapsed from about 45 billion to 10 billion. He lost most of it in days, folks. It's a big story of the past 2 weeks where literally this was the biggest thing, and but no one's talking about it.
On the weekend of his wedding, which was
Talk to me about it.
yeah. So first, I just want to touch base on the sort of bigger picture that you were talking about. With it looks like a Ponzi scheme, right? And I'll denigrate a different religion. I'll say it's not inshallah. It's a cargo cult because what we have is if you go back to the 90s, the early 2000s, you actually do have. I mean, and to be clear, there is still room to run on the technology sector. There are still innovations out there that will, increase productivity, that will make our lives better and that will make people money. But if you go back to the late 90s to the early 2000s, 2010s, especially if 2010s, you're talking about like being early on Facebook, advertising is a great moneymaker. These investments went 100x. They went mega huge. People think that if they make things look like the investments that went mega huge in 2005 or 2010, then they will again do the same thing. And so we're now in the cycle where the cargo cult takes over, and you have a performance of all of the signs that were present for the early tech bubble or the early Web 1.0 or Web 2.0 investments, but they're just kind of aping them. So, for example, again, plug the book, Stealing the Future, Sam Bankman Fried adopted all of these markers of being like a disheveled Mark Zuckerberg style genius. He intentionally left his hair messy. He intentionally wore shorts to important meetings, right? And now we have Leo Aschenbrenner, who not only sort of performed some of the signifiers, but actually was directly involved in and supported by this effective altruism cult slash mafia. I mean, the effective altruism group is, I think, quite novel. They are a financial mafia disguised as a philanthropic group of philosophers running nonprofits. I mean,
Oh,
it's
that's
really
a good description. That's a good description.
it's absolutely demonic, frankly. But Aschenbrenner, again, a genuinely, well, in contrast to Sam Bankman-Fried, seemingly a genuinely intelligent guy, graduated from Columbia at age 19. But while he was at Columbia, he started the Effective Altruism Club there. So this would have been 8 years ago ish. So before the SBF blow up.
And David, if you can, I know you've described it for the people joining us late. If you can, in a Cliff Notes, what's the philosophy of effective altruism?
Yeah. So it's unfortunately super complicated, but the Cliff Notes version is that there is Effective Altruism 1.0, which is a quite decent little moral philosophical thought experiment from Peter Singer, an Australian philosopher, that is basically just the first world has a ton of money. We have a moral obligation to help the developing world because our money has more impact there. So it became about monetary impact, or it started off as monetary impact, but then it became about the far future, not about helping the developing world, not about making first world money go farther, but about thinking about space colonization, about artificial intelligence, and about extinction risk and the end of the world, which has many impacts on the sort of ethical way that they think. And essentially, at the bottom, what matters is effective altruists are utilitarians, which means, in the most pessimistic reading, that they are willing to sacrifice the safety, comfort, and even lives of people who are alive today for hypothetical benefits of the population in the future. As
And
I
justify the means, no matter how psychotic, because we have to save humanity.
Ends justify the means, and we are the ones who know what means are correct and what ends to pursue. So this is the
Without
implicit.
oversight or transparency.
Yes, without oversight, without transparency, we have the money because we're rich. So this is another sort of major EA thing, is what's known as earn to give. If you're a billionaire, that's okay because you're going to give away your money to good causes. The fact that democracy and democratic inputs have no control over where that money goes, not at all an issue for effective altruists. They effectively don't believe in democracy. Um, and so Aschenbrenner was one of these effective altruists from a very young age. He wrote an essay called Situational Awareness in 2024, which we can get into, but is interesting because it essentially points to signs of a financial bubble and invites everybody to get in on the bubble. It's not about, and this is quite interesting, I don't think people know this. The Aschenbrenner essay is not about why AI is a powerful technology. It starts by saying, we thought we were going to need $10 million data centers. No, we're going to need $10 trillion data centers. He talks about money at the very start. That is the point here. It is not about some brilliant analysis of a technological revolution. It's just him saying the government is going to spend money on this. Everybody is going to spend money on this. You should get a bag.
Yeah,
So that's the start of this.
it was a fantastic explanation, and I appreciate it, David, because that's why David's a fantastic reporter. And show the book again because it's a great book.
Yeah.
Uh,
Just been flashing it. Stealing the Future.
This, I mean, it's folks, it's amazing.
For
This
those who want to
guy,
see it.
this guy, because I think it's a microcosm. I think it's a microcosm, folks. Leopold Aschenbrenner literally builds up $45 billion AI hedge fund, effective altruism. This is the future. I'm a brilliant man. By the way, he's a former OpenAI researcher, OpenAI,
Yeah.
Sam Altman, right? It's
Got
all.
fired from OpenAI for reasons that are still a little ambiguous.
And
And
Dario,
he also, I'm sorry to because
no,
I
please.
forgot it's like so incredible. He literally worked for some period of time at the FTX Future Fund, which was a nonprofit spinoff arm that funneled stolen customer money from Sam Bankman-Fried into effective altruist organizations, including those controlled by Will McCaskill, who's an Oxford professor who was part of the FTX Future Fund and also and who participated in sending $36 million of stolen FTX money directly to nonprofits that he, an Oxford professor, controlled by seats on the board. So here's Aschenbrenner already implicated in not just, randomly he's associated with FTX, but he sits in an arm of FTX that was participating in corruption.
I mean, and the best part is, OpenAI, folks. Again, I know this is what's common to us isn't common to everyone else. Sam Altman, OpenAI, right? Well, when we talk about Anthropic, and there's some breaking news I'll share with you right now that is I'm on CNBC, and Anthropic's CFO is leading early IPO meetings and has not
Mhm.
discussed valuation, sources say. This is going to be huge
Yeah.
when they do the IPO. But Dario Amodei of Anthropic, he was part of OpenAI, and him and his team quit over concerns about security
Mhm.
and safety. And they also said Sam Altman might be a serial liar and a
Yes.
psychopath. And
This
so
was where
that,
they tried to sort of some people this is Dario left before, but, I think it was a couple years ago now, the more sort of effective altruist wing of people at OpenAI tried to fire Sam Altman, very similarly to the way that a more sort of sincere and honest wing of the people at Sam Bankman-Fried's first startup, the hedge fund Alameda Research, tried to kick him out in 2018, 3 years before he committed major fraud at FTX. So, again, we're seeing history rhyme here perhaps.
yeah, and it's like this incestuous cabal of psychopaths who are like on, like you said it, like the spectrum of psychopathy. They're not, it's like, oh, this one's a little bit less psychopathic than that one.
Mhm.
They all know each other. It's literally almost like a 1 degree of separation. They work together. They probably sub with each other. They know each other. They're friends with each other, right? They partied with Epstein together. They're also competitive. They're part of this a mind hive, right?
Mhm.
They're part of the same WhatsApp
And
chat, signal
to
chat.
make a little connection there, we're talking about Aschenbrenner. One of his first, and one of his largest early investors, were the Collison brothers, Patrick, and I forget his brother's name, the founders of Stripe. Patrick Collison wrote an essay about something called Progress Studies with Tyler Cowen in 2019, and Progress Studies has gone on to. I've been talking with Andrew Orlovsky, who's a columnist for the Telegraph. He writes a lot about public-private partnerships in the UK, where there has been a lot of capture of those entities through this thing that has now been relabeled progress studies, but is essentially a parallel or outgrowth of effective altruism, headed by Patrick Collison. They're, I believe, Irish, so they're in the EU and in the UK, doing sort of stuff with effective altruism, where I think it's had a much more severe impact in some cases than it has in the US because it's a smaller government that's easier to control. But that money went into situational awareness. The Collisons put in 200 million. This was in the early steps, so this would have been early 2025 ish. And this is one of the important things to understand about that 45 billion valuation that we had a couple days before the entire thing blew up, which is that was based on growth in the assets since early 2025. So over the course of a year and a half, basically, that Aschenbrenner was building this fund. The Collisons, that is insiders, they put in the money at the very beginning. It grew, it grew, it grew, it grew. It got up to 45 billion. Think about in July. So last month in July, we're sitting at 45 billion, maybe June and July over the summer. This guy is getting all the coverage in the world about how genius he is. People are then putting in more money to this
Yep.
hedge fund. And this is where it gets really important to understand sort of the financial dynamics. Collison is safe. His 200 million by this point has grown to like 10 billion or whatever. He's 100x his or 10x or 20x or whatever. The guy who buys a share in Aschenbrenner's fund in June or July, that's who you want to look at because 45 billion here and then whoop down to 10 billion. The guy who bought here for complicated reasons that we don't have to get into, not only did he not make any money, not only did he lose 90% of his money, he might have lost 100% of his money. He might have lost more than 100% of his money after taxes. And so this is where we have to think about, like, it's not just, Ashburner is saying, oh, we're still up 80% for the year. Well, you're up 80% if you're Patrick Collison and you've owned it this entire time. You're not up at all if you bought when Ashburner was getting all of this glowing coverage about what a genius he is. You're way, way down. You took a huge haircut and you made effective altruists richer so that they could go and do political manipulation around the world.
And I'm so glad you mentioned this, folks, because this to me is a microcosm about what's it's just such an exquisite test case. This
Yeah.
is what's going to happen. They will fail up. Everyone who came on at the back end and invested in them are going to get effed, just like
Yes.
with crypto. The rich people got richer. All these schlubs who are like, crypto, they didn't make money. They're over promising. They're gonna under deliver. If they do deliver what they promise, like psychopaths, they've openly gloated, it'll remove all middle class and upper middle class jobs. So if it is successful, we're effed also, but it's not going
Right.
to be
Yeah.
successful. And then they've,
And this is, by the way, where the marketing element of the Zuckerberg essay comes in, because he is very focused on this message of personal empowerment, right? It's going to make you better at your job, not eliminate it. He
yeah,
really dismisses this whole. And to be fair, from a historical perspective, that's actually what technological innovation does. It changes jobs. It often creates more. It doesn't like wipe people out in the way that the effective altruists believe, because they have this very narrow worldview. Um, Two quick things on your point about this sort of, I mean, everything is a pump and dump, right? And
yeah,
that's why
everything.
this book is called Stealing the Future, because when you have these financial assets, what you see people like Elon Musk doing is sort of putting all of this hope in these financial assets, saying, this is the engine, this is the vehicle by which we're going to make the future better. So if you give me money now, I'm going to make that happen, and then I'm going to make all of your dreams come true. But they're actually pumping up these financial assets that then, as you say, don't deliver. And we'll talk, like, we can go back to what happened just a couple of months ago now with the SpaceX IPO, which people were incredibly hype on. Bought,
$1 trillion. He's the first trillionaire for
so
about
we
a week.
bought it. If you got the IPO, you got that at $135. If you bought it on day one, you got it at $150. Tape College group. This is me. This is me and my partner, Austin Campbell. We warned people that the SpaceX IPO was going to be a pump and dump. Go look for Zero Knowledge Group. Go look for our Zero In newsletter, where you get warnings about exactly these kinds of mechanisms being used live in markets to fleece people.
Yeah, I'm a simple English major, but I also told people, just wait a little bit on that one.
It's not that hard, and it really makes you think about, like, okay, where are these? I mean, I don't mean to denigrate people, but it drives home that there is a sucker born every minute, and a lot of them are
Yeah,
Americans.
absolutely. And folks, it's what I call inshallah money. I said that to Ben McKenzie, the actor, a couple of years ago when I interviewed
Mhm.
him right when he was on the crypto journey, and he's going to be
Right.
on in a couple of weeks talking about his
Yeah, he's
documentary.
got a documentary out, I
Yeah,
think.
to me, it's all inshallah money. It's inshallah. And then when you worship wealth like this country does, wealth equals brilliance. And and these suckers, folks, aren't just the uneducated. Look at all these rich, dumbass, educated mother effers who are part of the same incestuous cult who believe all this bullshit. The
Yeah.
difference is because they have money and power, they fail up. A parachute gives them a safe landing. The rest of us get screwed. And I'm telling y'all, my fear is we're going to look at a similar bubble burst. It's going to be like 2008, but so much dumber. And I hope I'm wrong. David, shamelessly promote yourself, sir, before you leave.
Yeah, check me out. Just at David Z Morris on X/Twitter is the easiest touch point. DavidZMorris.com. And yeah, this is my book, Stealing the Future. It's a detailed rundown of the Sam Bankman-Fried criminal trial. You have probably, if you're listening to this, you've probably heard about Michael Lewis and his book, Going Infinite, which
Yeah.
is a false account, or at least a deeply misleading account of the FTX fraud. And you can read my book and tell all your friends who bought that one that they're dumb.
Yeah, yeah, it was
So
really
that's
weird Michael went all in that direction. That was sad to see.
I have a lot to say about Michael Lewis, but certainly for me, he was a personal inspiration. One of the reasons I got into serious financial journalism. And so it was quite disappointing to have that. And frankly, to have other things emerge about his career and work at the same time that were not all that flattering.
Yeah, folks, read David's book. He knows this. Listen to him. He's on top of it. Thank you, David, for joining us, folks. This is the Left Hook. I'll be back at 2 o'clock with Jen Welsh, and I'm going to call it the Tough Titties Committee. And it's something that she said, and I'm going to call it just going to be 2 p.m. Tough Titties Committee Thursday. Join us. It's going to be Jen Welsh of IHEP. Thank you all for watching. This will be up later. It's the Left Hook. Please subscribe if you can. Please become a paid subscriber. Buy David's book. It's fantastic. Everyone, be kind, be informed, and please, oh, please don't be a techno fascist sociopath. Take care.
Thanks, Watch. Good to be here as always.